There is nothing more epic as a DM at the end of a role-playing campaign to bring out that epic boss fight that caps off a campaign. And today we're going to make not only one, but two of these encounters, and they're all going to be set in a fan favorite world. The worlds of Nordic mythology. Loot Studios have sponsored this video as it is time for them to release Journey into Elfheim. And this set includes miniatures, PDF supplements, and rules for a huge array of Norse-themed miniatures set in the worlds of Elfheim. Not only that, there's also the big world enders, because that's really what this campaign's about. And not only are we making all this, but we're also playing in it. Over on Tabletop Time Roleplay, we're gonna be roleplaying, fighting the World Serpent Jormungandr in an epic clash of the gods. There's so much to do to get ready for this. Not only do we need characters for our campaign, but we also need the monsters and the environments for the encounters. So let's dive into it.
So the first thing we need to do is choose the location for one of the epic fights we're going to be partaking in. And we have selected the High Elf Lodge, like the council building that we are going to be assembling, painting, and then doing battle in. It is huge. Like no joke, this is the footprint of the building. It's massive. So we're going to go put it on our 3D printer farm and kick it out in FDM. But luckily this mammoth building is actually pretty simple to go together. It's got a gigantic tiled foundation that supports everything, some really nicely detailed walls, and a roof that covers the entire thing, but is built so you can take it on and off if you want to have, an encounter inside. And so in the time it took me to explain how big this building is, it is now printed, and we can start assembling it all. And so, befitting of the regal nature of High Elves, we decided to go with white marble for the entire structure, and then bedecked with gold filigree on all of the columns and the sides of the walls. So we can really show off the designs and intricacies of the detail here. Then to complement that, some nice browns for the woods, and then we decided to also do the entire roof in green, as that would really tie in with the sort of natural aesthetic of these elves and their harmony with nature itself. Then when everything's painted, like I said earlier, we're going to assemble it all together, attaching all the foundations and sides of the walls, and then allowing the roof to settle on top without gluing it so we can remove it later. But now that the building is done, it needs someone to crash the party. Introducing Surtur. Take it away, Dave.
Because if there's anything Loot Studios is known for, it is their absolutely amazing range of miniatures. And one of the cool things with their minis is they're made available in 32mm or 75mm if you want to do high quality paint jobs on them. But I didn't need the 75mm on this guy because I was picking Surtur the Flame Giant, the leader of the Flame Giants in fact, and this model is huge. He's made of molten rock, so after he was printed out and cleaned up with auto supports that just peeled off, I could get started painting this guy. I decided to go for a white base coat and trial out a method of painting molten lava creatures. Jen has previously painted an avatar of Cain, and that is what I was thinking of when I attempted my Flame Giant. I stippled on yellow and then moved all the way through the spectrum from orange to red to a really dark charcoal black, moving from that inside area closest to those hollows which I left white all the way through to the outside and the center of all of the rocky, craggy pieces of skin. Those parts were painted charcoal black. Once all of this was painted, I used a nice warm yellow contrast paint as a glaze to bring all of this together, help add some warmth into the palette, but mostly as a method of blending these colors. Surtur has some decorative elements, and this is where I always fall down when it comes to painting bright glowing models. So rather than trying to paint bright colors that would clash, I went with dark colors, aiming to create a sense of contrast between the brightness of his fiery body and his metal armor and adornments. I don't know what magical fabric loincloth this guy has that's withstanding his literal fire body, but it is definitely doing the work, keeping our eyes away from his kingly junk. His loincloth I painted in a burgundy, and all of the panels of armor all over him I painted in Viking gold. Suitable, right, for a campaign heading to Elfheim. For the base, we have this molten lava landscape, but I didn't want to draw the attention away from Surtur, so I made sure to paint it several shades darker and duller, as if the heat was more buried under the lava that was cooling, and he himself was the source of most of the heat and what would draw all of your attention when you're looking at this model. And with the fire giant painted, we have our first nasty encounter that we'll be able to battle as we, Elves of Elfheim, try and save the world from Ragnarok. But a building alone is not much of a battleground, so it was back to Murray for him to flesh out that construction into a full-fledged diorama for us to do battle in.
That's right, a building an encounter does not make in this case. So I'm going to extend the area around this building and actually make it feel a bit more lived in. Like there's the rest of the world just around it. And what would be more fitting is a high elf garden just out the front of the building of the High Elders. When we stream over on Tabletop Time Roleplay, which you should be subscribed to, we have a dedicated playing area, and the dimensions of this circle that we play on just happen to be just big enough to fit this entire building on. And so that's what's going to determine the size of our encounters, our dioramas that we're going to build. It's this particular size, and we're going to see just how much we can cram into each of them. And with that size conveniently sorted out, I decided that what better environment for this building would be this beautiful high elf garden with a sweeping path of beautiful pristine stones leading up to it that is being charred and desecrated by Surtur as he marches up to absolutely wreck someone's day. And so that's exactly what I'm going to be building here. So I'm going to cut out some discs for us, grab some polystyrene, and I'm going to start sculpting. The first thing I'm going to do is cut out a circular shape of the polystyrene that will match the disc, and then I'm going to start hacking away at it. I have this idea of a lovely sweeping front that's going to lead straight up to the front stairs here. And so I'm just going to brutally hack away with it with an old chisel, which will give me a really rough and unrefined look. That'll work well for really organic shapes like rocks and gravel. The top of the polystyrene I'm not going to do a whole lot to, as I need it to be flat to glue the building onto, and I sort of want this manicured feeling for the area around it. It feels like something stuck up high elves would be obsessed with. And plus I'm planning on absolutely populating this area with trees, bushes, and shrubberies all over the place. And so the next step is to glue everything together and start applying this brown mixture of paint, PVA, and sand, which is going to cover, seal, bind, and protect, as well as apply a whole lot of texture onto the model. And I'm going to apply it really thickly, as this is going to let it take really long to dry, and I'm going to sprinkle all of the flock and things onto it, which, since I mixed glue into it, is going to bind all that down onto it. So I'm going to start by lining up the tops of my rock walls here, just with some nice dark stones, mostly for visual separation, as I wanted white rock going up to the town here. And then I'm going to absolutely go to town with all the really nice greens. Mixtures of flocks are always better than going with one single color, and you can see right here that mottling them together gives a really nice effect. And speaking of binding things into the paint and glue here, it's time to stick the building down. As that's one more thing, since I applied it so thickly, it's really going to fill up in all the gaps. It's always a bit immersion breaking when your building is sort of floating off the top of the dirt here, so this is going to solve that for us. I'm going to lean towards the really colorful bushes, and then I'm going to stick trees around the back to really sell the idea that we're on the edge of a beautiful manicured forest. And then to top it all off, like I said, I need that burnt, charred footprint, so I'm going to grab a whole lot of really dusty gravel. Anything that's basically brown or black, I'm going to start sprinkling it in the entrance here, and I'm going to top it off with even more black and brown pigment, just to make it look even more stained and desecrated. And just like that, we have our encounter, we have our monster. Now we need some heroes.
So when it came to creating our party for D&D, we had a plethora of options to choose from. Now this release has 3 different types of elves. You've got your dark elves, your high elves, and your wood elves as well. All of them have different classes that are represented in D&D, so we could pick which option and potentially which class we all wanted to play. And I have to say, all of these miniatures are absolutely gorgeous. If you're looking to play an elf or just include elves into your campaign, then this is a fantastic option for you. Each of them are gorgeously designed and they look like an absolute treat to paint up. So for our D&D campaign, we're basically making up the Avengers of Elves. So picked representatives from each of the factions. So typically when you think of elves in general, maybe there's a particular color scheme you might go for. Because this was a D&D party, I decided to throw all of that in the bin and make everyone color coded. This meant I knew who was going to play which character, made it really easy to read on the board, and I could have a little bit of fun with the color theory. Now I have been getting back into Magic the Gathering lately, so I think my brain was a bit coded into doing the different planes in colors, but hey, these colors also just work really well together. So in case you couldn't tell, we've got a red, purple, green, blue, and orange or yellow colored elf. And the first thing I did was just basically paint them up in their color, then working my way through some darker colors and lighter colors for separating the different elements that are on each elf. I also picked out a couple of the metallics that were on these guys and then focused on the weapon or spell that each elf is using. For example, for the one that I picked, which is this gorgeous wood elf that I painted up green, she has this sick little drum and she's going to be a bard, which is very cool. And I pretty much did the same thing for all of them. The red elf is an assassin and she's got her knives. The purple is like a necromancer dark magic and he's got these awesome skulls attached to chains. My blue elf is kind of like a barbarian with a big great axe. And the other dark elf is casting casting some really spooky magic, but it's kind of funny because I made her yellow and orange, which is a really bright and poppy color. And then she's a dark elf and she's casting skulls that look happy. So, which is kind of weird, but we'll see how it goes in the roleplay. And if you want to know who is playing which of these amazing characters, you'll have to head over to Tabletop Time Roleplay. We'll be starting our campaign next week.
So if you've been looking at these minis and getting hyped, it's about time we tell you where to get them. Well, this is Loot Studios' new Journey to Elfheim. They've previously done 2 campaigns, beginning with their first Journey to Valhalla, and then continuing to their second with Journey to Nidavellir. Combined, these journeys contain hundreds of detailed, gorgeous minis in 75mm or 32mm scale, as well as lore, story, and 5e stat blocks for your campaigns at home. The latest one, Elfheim, contains 3 elven factions, a monster pack, and an epic final boss, the World Serpent Jormungandr. The first faction, the Freyjakin, are inspired by wood elves, and they are the great protectors of this sacred tree. The second group, the Tyrbrandr, evoking all my favorite things about high elf aesthetics. And finally, the Rotgetir are inspired by dark elves and drow. Loot Studios are hands down my favorite RPG miniature company. And these are the sorts of models where in my home campaigns with my friends, the sculpts themselves ultimately have inspired characters that have been played in campaigns for years. Journey to Elfheim goes live June 23rd, and there are launch week discounts that end June 30th, so make sure to get in early. But if you want to get a head start, you can subscribe to the mailing list and get 5 minis absolutely free. And Journey to Elfheim is available right now, and you can get a further 10% off the early week discounts using our code TABLETOPTIME. Make sure to go check out the link in the description, sign up to the mailing list, and give Loot some love. So the destined Ragnarok will end with the World Serpent Jormungandr consuming the world, fighting Thor in a glorious battle that sees them both killed. But our glorious heroes don't want that to happen, and that's going to see a face-off with Jormungandr. This is such a cool model. It's a multi-part giant serpent that's available in this campaign. There are 3 separate segments, so you can print them out, and you can actually print multiples of the central piece, so you can have your big worm as large as you want. We couldn't look past this awesome sculpt, and I have to admit I'm a little bit biased from my history playing the God of War games. I can't help but think of the giant in the lake, and that is what is informing our second encounter of the day. So to that end, knowing that the Jormungandr sculpt was coming out of the water, I decided to make a little bit of host jutting out into the water. This arena is going to be very reminiscent of video game encounters with just enough space for the players to move around. I need to ensure that as much of the outside of the circle is made up of water, so our DM can make the World Serpent pop out of the water, move around, and really surround the party in this encounter. With the mental image of God of War informing my choices, Jen and I set about making this little diorama. I used the hot wire cutter to make some jagged, rocky edges to some foam, and deliberately shaped it out from multiple pieces so that it would be very narrow as you enter, but then widen up towards the center of the board. I also cut out a few little sharp rocks that will be poking out of the ocean, just to add a little bit of decoration to the areas that Jormungandr will be dominating. To texture the top just a tiny bit, I also got our handy bashing rock in the studio and pelted the foam until it had a nice bit of personality. With that done, we could glue down the pieces and get to painting. The first step was a thin PVA wash to secure everything in place and get it ready for paint, and to make sure we had a nice consistent finish across both the MDF and the foam. MDF can absorb a lot of moisture, which can affect how paints go down on it, so it can be quite helpful to put a PVA coat on that MDF to protect the paint from the wood. Here we painted the stone in a desolate gray, and I'm really thinking those very Nordic environments where not a lot of grass is growing on these rocks. They're quite barren and sharp as they jut out into rough and violent coastal waters. For the ocean, we used a gradient of dark blues, mixing in a little bit of green, which I always find is vital to create something that actually looks like seawater. And we blended lighter colors towards the coastline where waves would be crashing, and moved out to darker colors towards the depths, where Jormungandr will be bursting out and no doubt killing our entire party. Yeah, I've seen the stat block for this thing. He's CR 32, so I don't even think if we're epic level 20, we're gonna be able to do much, but that's fine. We just need to last long enough for Thor to rock up. Yeah, tune in to watch the carnage. We'll see what happens on that one. But for now, we do have to finish this board. So it's dry brushing time. All of the stone gets a dry brush, and then I stipple in some charcoal towards the bottom where all of the stone is kept nice and wet by those lapping waves. And here I get to add a fun little detail to those rocky outcrops in the water. I use a white acrylic ink and a toothpick, scraping down the side of them to make a copious amount of bird poo. If you've ever lived in coastal areas, these rocks that sit out in the ocean can often be the roosting point for a lot of seabirds, and those seabirds decorate them with butt paint as often as they can, leading to very stained rocks in an almost perfect reflective white. I think this does add a bunch of coastal personality to the piece, but now it's time for me to finish out the center, and to do that we use a mixed flock with some white rocks and a little bit of dirt, and much like Murray did with his previous one, a few small bushes and a few different flocks to create some little elements and textures to make it feel like a real lived-in environment. I do add a few little spicks and specks of poopy on the main bit of rock as well, as I think this helps tie it in with the other section. With all this done, Jen free-handed in her wonderful ocean waves in much the same way she did for our Kindred board, and we could finish up and cover the whole thing with a nice gloss coat, making this perfectly flat for playing on, but also looking nicely like the wet ocean waves when we're just staring at it in awe. But that wasn't all Jen had to do on this project, because of course with the environment set up, we need our big serpent itself, the centerpiece of this release, and such a gorgeous model. All the Loot Studios models have fantastic free supports, and our 3 pieces of Jormungandr printed outstandingly. And if I add any more rolled R's to my pronunciation of these Nordic words, I'm going to end up just saying so I'm going to race off before I do that, and Jen can tell you about how she painted the Great World Serpent.
Yeah, I'm not saying his name. I'm just gonna call it World Serpent. I'm sorry, I will absolutely butcher it. So I love painting big miniatures, and this guy is a very big and very long miniature, so I was very excited to get started with him. Now when you're handling miniatures with this much detail, I knew that I could rely on contrast paints to really bring that stuff out. I didn't have to paint any of the textures in because the detail was already there. So why did I choose to paint in blue? Well, see, I really like Leviathan, and he reminded me of Leviathan, so I decided to paint in blue. Plus he had the ice texture on his bases as well, so I thought blue would be a really cool color for this guy. Nevertheless, I did add in some extra colors. When working on his tummy, I incorporated a couple of skin tones with that blue, just to make it look a little bit different from his back scales. He also has this massive snail trail going from his chin down.
It's like my gym teacher in high school.
With a couple of rocks embedded in there as well, so I made sure to paint this in a brown so it stood out. The World Serpent also has this really cool detailing on the back of his scales as well. I interpreted this as like a mural or stone that had been cracked with a couple of gold accent pieces. Painting this in grey and then working my way up to a white, and then adding in gold for all of those little embellishments. He also has an absolutely beautiful crown on the top of his head, so I made sure to include that as well when painting in my metallics. It was about the halfway point that I realized the scales and his tummy were looking a little bit too similar, so I put on a wash of Nighthaunt Gloom, which gave this really nice gloomy texture to it, and also added in a little pop of green too, which I really like. This overall made his scales a little bit darker and did exactly what I wanted it to do. Lastly, for his base, again, I painted this up in the same contrast paint that I did him, as I feel like as a creature of the deep, he would want to blend in really nicely to his environment. So making them the same color just seemed natural. With a tiny bit of dry brushing on those base rocks and a nice black trim on those bases, this guy was pretty much done and ready to kill some elves. So the World Serpent was the very last part of this project that needed to be done, so now it's finally time to show you the reveals.
As we enjoy the fruits of our labor and these great models by Loot, I did want to give a shout out to our newest patrons, which is one of the perks of joining up to our Patreon. So a huge thank you for helping us to continue making these videos. Without you, it really wouldn't be possible. And I would like to thank our newcomers, Edward, Kyle Gordon, Crazy Puck, Fen71273, Frost, Radio Grackle, Ray Momo, Louis Math, Celery Dimp 624, and Keenan Barton Hutchings. Hope to see you all in the Discord. You're getting that awkward family photo. That's. I thought you'd do that way, and it'd be like we're family. It's the outro of this video, and we're being silly. Thank you so much to Loot Studios for sponsoring this video, and the links are in the description for the first part of their brand new mini waves. Don't forget, you can get the awesome welcome pack when you sign up to Loot Studios, which we've actually painted up an earlier version of that welcome pack on the channel as well, so you can check that out. It's some amazing minis, and they really are the market leaders in this whole space, so you won't regret getting these awesome minis.
Yeah, even when we do D&D campaigns at home, usually we'll use Loot Studios miniatures.
Yeah, one of our players, all the time, their characters are always just based off whatever Loot Studios that they can find.
Yeah, and they die a lot, so we get to see a lot of the range.
It's very true. You know who you are, buddy. Okay, so look, that's about it for this one. I'm really nervous and excited to play on these, and honestly, it's going to be so cool to actually play with these epic environments, like the Jormungandr one, like the idea of bouncing around that and using abilities and this serpent coming in and out of the ocean. It's going to be so much fun, and we really hope this has inspired some of you at home to maybe make some cool encounters for your own home roleplay games.
Yeah, this is really going to feel like an MMO boss fight, I feel.
Yes.
So if you want to see how that goes down,
Yeah, tabletop and roleplay. Do it.
you got it.
All right, but for now, it's time to go and make like the World Serpent and consume.
Because it's dinner time.